Hello, I'm Stephen Joseph. I'm the visiting professor at the University of Hertfordshire's Smart Mobility Unit, and I'm going to talk to you today about the future of transport in Hertfordshire and how it might change over the next few years. I think the first point to make is that transport in Hertfordshire has to change whatever happens. In Hertfordshire, we have a very car-dependent transport system. Many places people want to get to have been planned around cars and roads, and that means that there's a lack of good, cheap or safe alternatives to driving for many journeys. Cycling is seen as dangerous, and walking can be also difficult and takes a long time, and public transport is sometimes not there at all and isn't a good alternative for many journeys that people want to make. And this leads to a number of severe problems. Firstly, congestion. Parts of the county already feel like a car park, and what we're seeing with COVID is that things are actually getting worse. We're getting a car-led recovery. So I think that's a difficulty. And so if nothing else, we can't carry on as we are with everybody just driving everywhere for a lot of the journeys they want to make. Secondly, there are some environmental problems. I think a notable one is air pollution. It's often said, well, we're going to get electric vehicles, but actually there's pollutants from tyres and brakes, which you get from electric cars as well as from petrol or diesel cars. So there is an air pollution problem, which has some really quite severe health impacts. You get asthma, but also you get the particulates from tyres and brakes and from exhausts going into the lungs and into other parts of the body. And the final thing, well, I said everybody drives everywhere, but actually there are a lot of people in Hertfordshire who don't have access to a car. They're too young, they're too old, they're disabled, they can't afford it. And that, for them, means social isolation. Those without cars can't access the goods and services they need because it's difficult for them without a car. But there's an overriding need for change in how we get around, and that's climate change. Transport is the biggest contributor to UK carbon emissions, and if we need to tackle that, we will need to tackle that, and that will require cuts in traffic levels as well as shifts to electric vehicles. So we need to change. What does change look like? Well, I'm going to say what I think this might mean in the long term, because the South West Herts joint plan is looking at the long term. And I think in the long term, if we're going to take the problems I've outlined seriously, if we're going to tackle climate change, if we're going to give people access to the services and goods that they need without having to rely on cars all the time, we'll need a range of measures. Firstly, we'll need much better public transport. It'll need to be electric, it'll need to be frequent, it'll need to be integrated so the services link up with each other. And we'll need to be looking at trams as well as trains and buses. And we'll need to be looking, as Hertfordshire County Council already are, in fact, at east-west rapid transit, not just the north-south train lines that Hertfordshire already has. These public transport services will need to link to other services, to taxis. We might be talking about demand-responsive services. I'll come to that later. And we'll have interchanges between them where the buses meet the trams and trains, are integrated into them. There is simple ticketing that goes across all public transport. Secondly, I think we'll be paying for public transport. We'll be paying for transport differently. At the moment, you pay fuel and vehicle taxes. In the future, apart from anything else, because electric vehicles won't pay those taxes, we'll be looking at paying by the mile. so that you'll have a kind of road charging scheme that pays by the mile. But you might also look, if we're going to take this seriously, at public transport that's either cheap or free. A third element, I think, is changing the nature of the places we live in. There's been a lot of talk in this and other countries of the idea of 15-minute neighbourhoods, creating places where the services you need, the shops, schools, health centres, etc., maybe even employment, can be walked or cycled to within 15 minutes. Those places that you cycle to or walk to might be community hubs that bring together local services, but might also hire out e-bikes, cargo bikes, e-scooters, shared cars, etc. And linking all these, you will have high-quality cycle lanes, taking advantage of the revolution of electric bikes that are already coming on stream, and following places like the Denmark, which is building cycle lanes alongside its main roads, linking places across the country, but also taking you into town centres and local centres with good cycle parking. And instead of the mayhem caused by vast numbers of different local delivery services, we'll have coordinated ones using electric vans, cargo bikes, and linking to railway stations where there will be parcel collections and depots and much more freight going by rail. I've mentioned a long-term prospectus, but actually you can find almost all of that somewhere either in the UK, some of it even in Hertfordshire, or in other European countries. So it's possible to do this and to follow good practice now. To get to this, I've said this is long term, but I think we need to start now. And there are several things that we need to do that will take us in the direction I've outlined. Firstly, planning the new homes that are being planned across the county in the right places that can be well served by public transport, and plan them with the right design as well, with good public transport and with good routes for walking and cycling, and with the right design so as to make the public transport and walking and cycling a good first choice. Secondly, we need to build on bike hire schemes that are already starting to happen in the county. Watford already has a bike hire scheme. We need to spread these elsewhere and have them electric bikes, not just ordinary bikes as well. Thirdly, we need better public transport, particularly better bus services, building on existing initiatives. The Interlink partnership that's already being developed, the demand-responsive transport that we see in Watford, Arriva Click as it's called, in Royston and North Hertfordshire, which has just been launched, and improving bus links to the stations. And we should also pilot reduced fares to see what happens when, as has happened in places like Harrogate and Swansea, operators or councils have made public transport either free at weekends, or in the case of Harrogate and Newcastle, the operators are charging £1 for a flat fare of £1 for services after 7 p.m. And finally, we need to look at community hubs to pilot the hubs I've mentioned in Hertfordshire towns and villages. Hubs with workspaces, with bike hire and e-bike hire, e-scooters, etc., and to link those up with public transport. I think there's a general recognition that we can't go on as we are in Hertfordshire, that there's too much traffic. The place, as I've said, feels like a car park some of the time, and is increasingly dominated by traffic. And this isn't good either for people who drive, who have to drive further and more, and those without cars who are increasingly excluded. And there is climate change as an overriding imperative for changing what we do. So I think that we need a new vision for transport. I've set out a long-term approach, and I also have suggested ways we can start now to deliver it. Thank you.